Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Chelsea Echo. Welcome to your end of season review. Chelsea qualifying for the Champions League and winning a trophy. Sounds like a pretty good season, but there are, of course, ups and downs that we all need to talk about. As you can see, I am in slightly different surroundings, and it's in surroundings that make me look relatively intelligent, purely because obviously there's lots of books and they're not football autobiographies. And that is purely because we are half an hour behind schedule when we're supposed to record. That's because my computer decided to do the spinny wheel of death and is still doing the spinny wheel of death as we started recording in my office. So I'm sat in my living room. And also I thought, do you know what? Whilst moving everything, I'll grab some headphones. We'll get stuff moving, right? And I thought I'll grab my AirPods because they're nice and easy, plug them straight in. It's a plug and play situation and we're all good to go. I have decided in my infinite wisdom to have them go through my washing machine. However, how do I know that? I hear you ask, Dan. Well, I have used the Find My thingy-majiggy on my phone, right? And it's still running. It's all good. However, there is a red mark on it. So that's interesting. I wonder why that is. And I've played the noise, and I've gone and found they're in our utility room at home. And I'm like, fucking hell, shit, right, okay. They're just going to be in here somewhere. And I thought they were in the pile of washing. I was like, oh, okay, fine. No, they are inside my washing machine, not in the drum, inside my washing machine. The amount of pain that I felt seeing that and having to call Dan and try and explain why I was late was absolutely horrendous. So, Dan, I'm very sorry we're half an hour behind schedule, but I hope you can understand the fact that I am incredibly miserable right now and my life is pretty much over.
No, it does. It almost sounds like a Final Destination death scene. But for your AirPods.
Yeah,
In a Final
yeah.
Destination movie, you would have tried to go in and try and reclaim the AirPods and died yourself. So I'm glad that you just got angry and just walked off. That's what most people
Well,
should do.
the worst part about this is, right. So when I put that wash on yesterday, I was like, okay, I forgot I had chewing gum in there, one of my pockets, and I had to open it back up to chuck like my brother's stuff in. I was like, I'll whack it in with it. Oh, I've got the gum, picked it up. If only my AirPods had fallen out because it was literally at the start of the wash. Instead, I've got chewing gum. I had to save. I saved chewing gum and not AirPod Pros. I am absolutely seething. I'm so angry right now. You have no idea.
Great place to be walking into end of season review.
Yeah, I know it is. It's like if you don't laugh, you cry. So yeah, I've got to somehow after this take apart the washing machine. I couldn't really call it a dishwasher, but it's not. It's a washing machine, and deal with that. But that'll be fun. Other than that, Dan, obviously I've not had the best of starts to my day. What's been going on with you?
It's been very chilled. I feel like this week has kind of just been a trying to decompose and kind of like very much, is that the right word, or just kind of relax a little bit after the end of the season,
De-stress.
is
Yeah.
de-stress. um it's been nice to kind of see what's going on with the transfer stuff, because obviously that started to click into gear, which has made it seem a little bit hectic. But yeah, it's I'm happy the season's done. I'm happy it ended the way it did. So yeah, it's trying to recalibrate, because we need a little bit of rest before very soon we're going straight back into it with the Club World Cup. So yeah, there isn't much rest for the wicked. So
Indeed, indeed. And obviously, with the Club World Cup, Dan and I have been chatting. So we are hoping that we're going to be excruciatingly busy with
decompress.
that.
That was the decompress. Why did I say decompose?
Decompress.
I knew the
Decom-
word
um,
was something. That's probably a sign of I wasn't trying to decompose. Is like dying, isn't it?
it is.
Yeah.
I knew what you were trying to say, but then I've now just almost like we've just agreed on something that's completely ludicrous. Um, but yeah, anyway, Club World Cup. Dan and I will be busy. I have a meeting, funnily enough, next week, which could distinguish how we are recording our content for the Club World Cup, which that's all I'm going to say at this given time period, because there's a lot on the line with that, and it's going to be very interesting to see how we get that moving. But yeah, there are lots of plans going in place ahead of the season. But before we talk about the new season, and obviously that's going to be a whole new kettle of fish, Dan and I obviously need to go through everything that happened in 24-25, and it is an absolutely one hell of a roller coaster, I think is the best way to describe it. But before we do that, Dan, there's something we need to do, don't we?
Yeah, it's the great people from the Donk Report, they've gone through their union struggles this season. They've established themselves a bit more. They feel on their feet. From what I hear, they're actually in negotiations with Saudi to move over there for to become a sponsor of the Club World Cup, because there's a load of Saudi sponsorship going in for the Club World Cup. So I don't even know if they're going to be here for the Club World Cup. But yeah, the Donk Report is here, the final one of the season. And hopefully it'll be a good one to set us off for our season review episode.
It's going to be a very, very good one. And listen, I think if we get the Donk Report right, what we should do, if they don't get the Club World Cup, we'll just stick them on the Imperial Wolf shirts, front shirt sponsor. That'll shut them up for the rest of the season, get it all
I think
going.
so.
But we'll figure that out. But anyway, Dan, who is going first week? Is it I or is it yourself?
I think it's you, Lewis. It's got your name next to it. I think this is the first one, especially with the first news bit of this. I think it definitely is right down your street.
Oh, fantastic. Well, let's get going then, shall we? An overdue win for the Barclaysmen and lazy commentators everywhere this week as Liam Delap signed for Chelsea from Ipswich. Cue the upcoming 9 months of Darren Fletcher reminding us that he is a son of a famous Premier League footballer and an iconic Stoke player, Matthew Etherington.
Chelsea fans are in panic this week when reports emerged the club bid a low £10 million for Mike Maignan. It's believed once the bid was submitted, the AC Milan chief stormed out the room, meaning Chelsea cannot bid again for another 7 days.
Cole Palmer has taken the number 10 shirt in the 25-26 season, meaning that Mudryk no longer has one. Mudryk is expected to take a gap year to Asia to rediscover himself and along the way become a contestant on the next series of Race Across the World.
That would be an interesting series. I'd like to. We can talk about this after. Who would partner Mykhailo Mudryk? But finally, here in big news, Sabrina Carpenter this week blew up the internet, posting a video of her hitchhiking to promote a new song. This is a pretty good preview for how the summer is going to look like for Joao Felix, and that is the Donk Report for the end of the season. Yeah, I mean, who would? Because it's usually in couples, isn't it? With Race Across the World.
It'd probably be his PT that gave him the drugs, to be honest. It'd give him some extra peds. Okay, Mykhailo, we're going to climb Mount Everest. What are we going to do to climb Mount Everest? I just realised it just sounds like Count Dracula. That was just slightly racist, but you know what I mean. You know, crack on from there. I was obviously thinking about Sabrina Carpenter then when you mentioned that. I was like, it's been my favourite video this week. I've rather enjoyed it. That is a Donk Report.
Insight into Louis Benevente's mind right there. That is the highlight of his week. Is what was it, like a 10-second clip?
Yeah, it was. I paused it though. But aside from that, we'll move swiftly on. And start talking about obviously Chelsea's 24-25 season. Jesus Christ, I've just exposed myself there. That's an absolute weapon of a statement I just made there. But look, let's jump straight into it, Dan. Obviously, straight off the bat, Chelsea were very, very busy in the summer. It was part one we have here called, which is a pleasant surprise. And obviously that is when you and I did the Echo together. This has been your debut season on the Chelsea Echo, and it's been a lot of fun, I will say that, straight off the bat. But with all of that being said, look, Chelsea obviously had a rather pleasant surprise in terms of how it went from the very start of the season. Obviously, the one thing that you and I were very vocal about from the start of the season was, of course, Chelsea's lack of intelligence in the transfer market, I think it's fair to say. Philip Jorgensen coming in, Amari Kellerman, I still haven't seen him play, Pedro Neto, Renato Vega, Mark Gui, or Sparky Plado, as he's known here on the Chelsea Echo, Jadon Sancho, Tosin Adarabioyo, Kiernan Drewsbury Hall, Joao Felix, and Pedro Neto, who I saw on the pitch at Stamford Bridge when he was unveiled in the Inter Milan friendly, where I was also in the club programme. But Dan, let's jump straight into it. Some big, big wins. 6-2 over Wolves. 1-0 win over Bournemouth, which was a massive step up considering we were really struggling there. 3-0 win over West Ham. 4-2 win over Brighton. 2-1 win over Newcastle. 3-0 over Villa. 5-1 over Southampton. 4-3 over Spurs. And 2-1 over Brentford. Obviously, kind of bringing it all together. How are you feeling sort of at that point? Obviously, through that whole period, let's just sort of go through it. Obviously, there's some stats here and some things that are worth talking about. What is it that you sort of highlighted there and was like, okay, I feel like we're in a good way here?
Yeah, I think the big thing that we probably spoke about in our season preview was because of the chaos of the summer, a change of head coach again. A lot of people, including myself, being doubtful about Enzo Maresca taking the role. And yeah, mainly a transfer window that just seemed to weaken the squad. I think there was a lot of fear about like how the season was going to go, but undeniably, the first chunk of the season, like in terms of a preview of how we set up this season review, because obviously we can't talk through everything, right? So you have to try and break it down into segments of the season to try and get a theme. And I do think there are three distinct parts of this year. And this first part, yeah, was a pleasant surprise. I don't think anyone expected Chelsea would be even close to the top of the Premier League where we were in early December. There's a lot of months there, like you're not covering the Conference League wins, but those were so routine and so expected. It was kind of, you know, any team could have probably gone quite far. I was speaking to an Ipswich fan recently. I think probably Ipswich would have got a similar way in the league phase for Chelsea. It's more looking at the Premier League because there were some significant wins. I think the big thing for me was that the positives of last season or the end of last season continued. Cole Palmer having an incredible start to the year. One performance that stands out is obviously Brighton at home, where he scores
Oh,
4 goals in
that
one
free
half. I
kick
mean,
as
just
well.
absolute insanity, really, in terms of an individual performance. Nicholas Jackson, it's easy now to look back and say a lot of people feel down about Nicholas Jackson, but he did have a very strong start to the season. Like I look at some of those individual performances he had, particularly West Ham away, and the link continuing with Cole Palmer, the goal he scored against Newcastle, even leading up to the Villa game as well, where I think he scored quite a brilliant opener as well. That Villa performance in particular, I mean, as you're probably going to move to with like the second part. That Villa performance was really like one of the best performances of the season.
Yeah,
For a long period of time, it stayed that way, and the team looked to be gelling. There was a vibe around Stamford Bridge that was positive. It felt like Maresca and his players were overcoming the chaos that seemingly was around them. One part that isn't kind of listed here, but we did a whole podcast special at the time, was the whole Bowley and Igbali split up. Like, if you remember that, right at the start of the season. So
yeah,
there was a lot going on around the scenes. I guess we'll get to some of the negatives of this first part, but do you agree? Are there other things that maybe stuck out to you? Because I just think, I think it was just in this first block of the season, it was us doing a lot better than anyone anticipated. Really, like I don't think many people
yeah,
expected it would go this well.
yeah. I mean, for me, it was. I think the football we were playing, I loved. Now, I love that high energy and look like Chelsea were conceding goals. Let's be honest, but we were outscoring teams. We were really putting teams to the sword in terms of the quality we had on the pitch, and it was aggressive, fast paced, front footed football. Um, which obviously we are going to talk about a little bit later, because I think it's fair to say that you and I still maybe aren't the biggest fans of how Chelsea are playing their football currently. But that's a conversation to look forward to. And obviously, if Chelsea are winning things next season, I don't think you and I will care too much about that. Let's be very, very honest. But I thought the football we were playing was spectacular. Obviously, being at Wolves as well, I decided the day before that I was going to go. Jumped on the train. Obviously, the notorious PIE had its only outing of the season, because I then had no money to get around the country. But it's very much a case of that game in itself, the way Chelsea just absolutely tore Wolves apart was, I thought, testament to the quality that I thought this side would have. And I think that was reinforced. And like you said, that the Villa game, the Brighton game, that Spurs game as well.
Yeah.
Chelsea, coming back and really, really going for it as well. I thought, you know what, like there's something going on here. There's something special. Um, and then I just thought, we saw a side which had the qualities of Pochettino in his obviously later spell, and then was combining beautifully, and it looked like coming together quite nicely with Maresca's possession style football, because you had those moments where Chelsea controlled the ball, but also it was the transitional football. That Brighton game was a great example of that. I mean, the way that Noni Madueke and Cole Palmer in that game were combining, you think about how aggressive and front footed they were in that game, and obviously we saw flashes of later on in the season as well. Even when Chelsea were maybe more focused on retaining possession and patient build up more than hitting teams on transition, you saw some real quality. And like you said, we talk about Jackson as well. I mean, obviously we've got to talk about him when we do our season preview, which we still need to figure out whether it's going to be before the Club World Cup or after, or it might end up being two separate previews, to be honest, guys.
Yeah.
But I think overall, you look at it and you go, do you know what? Like, we saw a player there who, really kept up his form from the back end of the previous season, shifted it into gear, and looked like someone who could lead the line for Chelsea. Um, it was spectacular, and I think with the benefit of hindsight, it was very much the part of the season where you think you saw the combinations, like I said, of Maresca and Pochettino. You saw Pochettino's late spell, Chelsea, which was really strong in that period, one of the best performing teams in the country, combining with Maresca as he was bedding in what he wanted to do. And
Mm.
overall, there was just a really, really strong footballing identity. What I thought at the time was going to be being put into place. But other with that being said, there, as much as I'm sounding very negative as we go into the second part of the season, which I think is fairly negative, to be honest, this was absolutely massive. But there obviously were you know caveats to all of this. Obviously, losing to
Mm.
City, losing to Liverpool. The gaps in the squad. To be honest, there was all A and B thing we were talking about, which obviously we saw, and you touched on. Obviously, in the Newcastle League Cup game when we got knocked out, you saw a very, very clear difference in the squad rather than having consistent quality throughout.
Yeah.
Um, and that obviously led to some questions being asked by you and I, as they had been throughout the entirety of the season. I think it's fair to say Dan and I have not been extremely positive, even in the points when Chelsea were great. I think it's fair to say, we saw these performances, thought these were great games, but how long is it going to last? And obviously, that kind of kicks in the second part of the season when the brief dreams of a title charge were over.
Mm. Well, I don't think any of us. It was kind of a joke at the time. Like, I don't think anyone expected us to be in a title race. Like, I
No,
don't,
no, no,
even
no,
at the
no.
height of it, it was more like just the joy of seeing the team play well above
Yeah.
expectation from what we had, but then also the hope that, well, we can, if we can sustain the whole thing of the season, right, which then became like obvious in the second half of the season, was it was all about Champions League qualification. And I think the hope was that maybe our strong start could put us in a commanding position where it doesn't become a drama later on. Like,
Hmm.
where are we going to qualify? Are we not going to qualify? And it become tense, which unfortunately it did. And we move swiftly onto kind of the second part of the season, which I've titled Underlying Metrics. So whilst the first part of the season we've kind of gone from August to December, where you have a flurry of goals, some really good attacking play, Maresca seeming to quickly embed himself into the job and gain a lot of plaudits. The second part is late December, mid to late December to March, effectively. And it all starts to kind of change. The mood and tone of the season completely changes. It starts with that Boxing Day loss at home to Fulham,
Oh,
which was a really, really bad game. I mean, like, you can talk about how controlling Chelsea were, say, Villa, right? Where it felt like from the off against a pretty good Villa team, Chelsea completely dominated, completely held them at arm's length. And even some of the performances that were going to herald very late in the season, where it felt like Chelsea were very professional, very focused. The worst thing about that game, and I've seen games like it in the past at Chelsea, this is not a Maresca thing, where you can see what's going to happen very early on in a game, or at least 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes before it happens, and feeling powerless to stop it. And I think that was the great
yeah.
frustration of this kind of mini period, if we're going to talk about over Christmas, where it felt like Chelsea started games strong. They'd have like a strong opening 10, 15 minutes, quickly fade. The team would adjust. The opponents would start to gain territory or start to not only nullify Chelsea's attack, but also start to create their own chances. Fulham scored 2 late goals, but I have to say, I think most people in the ground on that particular day could have seen those 2 goals coming,
Yeah.
half an hour earlier. And I think it was the inaction of Maresca, but I think frustrated people.
Mm.
We lost to Ipswich, which was a terrible defeat, considering this was a team who hadn't won in the Premier League at home yet that season. We failed to beat Palace, another situation where you start the game strong, but then you end up losing the lead late on. Bournemouth, a game again where Chelsea had a really strong first half. Bournemouth, to be fair to Bournemouth at this particular time in the season, were in a good run of form. Like, they were exceeding expectation, but Chelsea had to claw a point back, which felt frustrating. The loss to City as well,
Oh my
um,
god.
away from home. The Sanchez running out, but another game where Chelsea starts strong, could maybe even be 2. There was a great Cole Palmer chance. This is the period when Palmer fails to score and goes on this long barren run. I think it was a culmination of things. It was a culmination of frustration over Maresca's approach, that slow possession style starting to come in, repetitive trends of the team starting well, but then fading as the game went on, not reacting to it. Player individual performances really going off a cliff. I think
Mm.
Jackson's the one that stands out for most, is because of the amount of chances he missed. And then let's start with the performances themselves, because I guess the second part of this is the January transfer window. But let's start
Yeah.
with those games, because that very quickly, it shows you how quickly things change at Chelsea in the span of a couple of weeks, because there were so many games. Changed the mood from kind of real optimism to a bit of pessimism.
Yeah, it was an absolutely horrendous time. And thank you for reminding me about Robert Sanchez and that absolute farce, because that was another day. You talk about headphone gate I'm having to deal with today. This was Fat Llama gate, where I was trying to drop off I'd done a shoot that week, and I was trying to drop the equipment back, and I couldn't get a cab to get back in time for the football. I waited 45 minutes for a taxi to try and get home. It was absolutely heinous that day. And then it was reinforced by Robert Sanchez doing what he does best and absolutely stinking out the gaff. And then I got food poisoning from a Domino's. So yeah, great day. But I mean, look, like,
What Dominoes did you have to get food poisoning? Was it just a standard like margarita, or are we talking meat feast here?
I do. It's just it was what my usual order is, and I kept it as my usual order since. And now I'm really craving one, which is absolutely nuts, and it's never going to happen, obviously, because I'm now midway through a cut. I've lost 6 kilos over the past 2 weeks. Fucking brilliant. But I'd say I have basically so my go to like a football order when I want to treat myself today. Like, obviously, as you can tell by the day had been having, I was like, I just need to just sit down and do nothing whilst I watch the football. So I was in my bed eating a Domino's like a pig, and it was superb. I did. I always have it. So I get a large pizza, and I always save half for the next day. So I do a large pizza, garlic bread, and I get like 6 chicken wings. Obviously, I get the big
Yeah.
pack, and I save the next day. Um, and I was like, "So what I have on my pizza? I go ham, mushroom, olives, and meatballs. That's those are my toppings, and it is superb usually. But that day, I think I can't remember. It's like I think I'd been, when you're like midway through a cut, you're eating clean, or you're eating really well for just because you want to, basically. And they thought, you know what, I'm going to treat myself. So you get like a takeaway, and it just goes straight through you. Like, that's exactly what happened, but it just kept happening. Like, it was like, I thought, okay, the first one's done, the worst of it's over. No, it was like 2 days where it was just non-stop. And I'm really sorry if you listen to this and you're having to hear that. But, Dan asked a question and I have to answer. So, yeah, that was not
Right.
helped.
Well, in some ways, it kind of reflects this point of the season. To be honest, food poisoning after a Domino's, I think, is pretty reflective of how we all felt watching Robert Sanchez
Oh,
running off his goal line for no reason.
especially
But
Trevor
then
Chalobah, by the way. That image is seared into my
yeah,
head.
the Wolves game in particular, yeah, the staring at him. I think that was one of the images of the season, to be honest. Obviously in this period as well, we have the Jan window where Renato Vega and Joao Felix, two of the summer signings, both leave on loan. Chalobah comes back, which was an embarrassing moment, I think, for the sporting directors after they banished him. But in the end, I think this was a positive move because Trev obviously ends up
Yeah,
playing quite a big role later in the season. But there was no new striker, and that was kind of a big frustration that Maresca had already kind of maybe hinted or shown from his lack of action from the subs bench that he didn't quite like the options he had. Still no improvement on that. So Chelsea also could have maybe brought back Andre Santos, could have maybe brought back Leslie Ugochukwu for more midfield depth. We didn't do that. So some big risks were taken, and I think that only heightened. In some ways, you had the culmination of football on the pitch not being good, along with the chaos of our transfer business, and it just was a nightmare storm. And
yeah.
then we go into February where we're knocked out of the FA Cup to Brighton. We then go back to Brighton and we're battered 3-0,
Oh God.
which was a week of real hell, really, in terms of just abysmal.
It makes a
I'm,
Valentine's Day massacre by Al Capone look like a
yeah,
kid's playground.
the tippy tap. I remember if it was like, was it Jamie Carragher who called it like tippy tappy nonsense or something about our performance at Brighton?
Yeah,
Um, it probably was.
me. Well, it
We
was
get the
tippy tappy
two
nonsense.
2-1 loss to Villa, where Jorgensen lets it slip through his hands. Another game where Chelsea went 1-0 up. Um, you've got online disharmony. We end up in February with this protest that I remember we covered on the show as kind of, yeah, it wasn't a great time. You've also then got Maresca's comments in the press starting to really rile up fans and annoy fans. The do Chelsea want top four? Do they not want top four? That kind of switching week to week. His comments about being knocked out of the FA Cup not being that big of a deal because we've got the Premier League and Conference League, given Chelsea's history with the FA Cup. The performances themselves, I distinctly remember a 1-0 against Leicester and a 1-0 against Copenhagen that were wins, and important wins in the context of how it ended up in the Premier League, but were performances that just didn't really give you much optimism. And we ended this period. I think it's the right place to end this period with the Arsenal loss away from home, which I still
Oh,
stand by as one of the lowest points of the season. It reminds me, it kind of feels like the spiritual sequel to Man City away in 2018 under Conte. And what I
yeah,
mean by that is going away to a big ground on a big occasion. The fans want your team to show up, and Chelsea meekly, but just absolutely doing nothing in the game. And this was not an Arsenal team that were flying and flowing or were at their peak either. And then again, post game, Chelsea have not even, it seemed to attempt to throw a glove at Arsenal. And then because it was only 1-0, apparently it's some sort of achievement. I think at this point, this is the I know we have some setbacks in the final period of the season, but obviously, again, hindsight is a wonderful gift, and it's very easy to narratively look at the season and neatly wrap everything up. Obviously, at this point, you don't know what's going to come next, but this was the lowest point of the season for me. Of like,
mm.
the team isn't playing well. You're being told it's playing well, but in front of your eyes, they're not playing well. We're not winning games of importance. We're not even showing up, it seems like, for games of importance. And the fear is that Champions League football is slipping away on a weekly basis.
Yeah. No, it was for me in that game. It's when he in the last minutes was having a laugh with Jury and Timber and Zamareska, gave him a little high five. I still remember that game quite vividly because that was just as I was moving out of my flat. Um, and I remember the goal went in, and I just got up, went to my kitchen, and made my lunch, knowing full well that Chelsea just were not going to do anything. And I had it on in the background, I could hear it, and I was kind of going, I don't even. There's nothing to follow here. At that point in the season, it was like you just knew that there was no respite in positivity. It was going to be a case of you were going to sit there and consistently You knew how Chelsea were going to play. The patterns were obvious. It was stuff even like down to a T where, as a fan, you could watch that and go, right, Chelsea got a goal kick. Robert Sanchez is going to put it down. Levi Cole is going to come short. The team are going to go up. The team are then going to come back. They're going to pass it short to the left back. They're going to pass it into midfield, and that was it. And that was telegraphed every single passage of play that Chelsea had from a goal kick. And I would say, by the way, I know it's going back a little bit, but in terms of the transfers, I was a bit gutted about Renato Vega. I still am, because I thought we saw a player there and somebody who could really help the team, and he's wanted to play as centre back. That's all he wanted to do. And Chelsea are talking about, right now signing Joao Hato as a left back, centre back cover, and Renato Vega's already been performing quite well, at Juventus. So be interested to see how that develops, obviously. But he's someone who I thought would be great and could to step in even. But back to obviously March time and Chelsea's loss against Arsenal. That was also, I think, I've known you for 10 years now, and I've very rarely seen you lose your cool. And Dan losing his cool, by the way, is very different to my losing my cool. I think everyone knows how spectacularly loud I am normally and how spectacularly loud I get when I really do lose my rag. But Dan obviously is kind of, it's like an underwater volcano almost. Like you just feel it, and Dan just like it was. You wouldn't know it if you didn't know him, but it was very short, sweet, and concise, is how I'm going to put it. There was no messing about. It was that was at that point, I think, Chelsea fans, after being in such a strong position, and I think, we're going to talk about underlying metrics, right? Let's talk about the clear and obvious metrics. Chelsea were only a few points behind Liverpool in December. And I think we all thought that game against Brentford at home with a last-minute winner from Nicholas Jackson was a scene where Chelsea was showing not only can they tear teams apart and not only can they fight back, but they can play dirty and get the results they need to. It just turns out it was a prelude to what we were going to be seeing between late December and March, where Chelsea just really struggled at any given point. And I just think, overall, that Arsenal loss just compounded it. And I think the other thing, if you want to talk about the metrics, being those few points behind Liverpool, and then by the time Chelsea played Manchester City outside of the top four, where Chelsea could have actually strengthened their grip, they actually completely fell away for a period. And that Arsenal loss, where Chelsea just reinforced that they could not get wins over teams in and around them, was a real struggle. And it still sits with me, because I am very much, I'd like it to be balanced and think, look, like obviously, as we're going to talk about the later half of the season, we've obviously done spectacularly in the back end with strong professional performances, but we were seeing shades of what happened to Leicester under Maresca, where they were by far and away the best team in the Championship. And then there was a significant period where they were just completely falling apart. And fortunately, they held on and they won the league. But that's 2 seasons where Maresca's been in charge of professional teams, and we've seen similar situations. So it's definitely in the back of my mind as Chelsea head into the new season. But also, it does come with other factors as well, where, look, you can't completely hold Maresca accountable for everything, because it's not just him. But we talk about the transfer window, the sporting directors signing Vega and Felix permanently in the summer, see both of them exit in the January, not signing a striker, believing that Nicholas Jackson and Mark Gui were the 2 guys to lead the line for Chelsea, both of which were injured on deadline day. And obviously, Sparky Plaido was out until literally the middle of May. So for 5 months, we were relying on one
Noni
striker.
as well. I think Noni went down at a similar time, didn't he? I think Noni Madueke
Yeah.
went down Brighton. I think it was the second Brighton game. So he was out for a substantial period of time as well. So yeah, there was a lot. I think that at this point, because as well, there was what I distinctly remember post this game, there was a long break. There was the international break, and it felt like there was also the FA Cup quarterfinals this year that
Yeah,
got their own weekend, which they don't usually do. So Chelsea's next game was actually a lot longer. There was
it's
a
a
long
month.
break. Yeah, it was effectively, and we had Spurs at home on a Thursday night, and then we go into the final period of the season, right, where it's all or nothing effectively. Are Chelsea going to be able to win the Conference League and qualify for the Champions League? And the run Chelsea had was tougher than all of their rivals going for Champions League qualification. So how it ended up, we beat in the Premier League this is we beat Spurs, draw to Brentford and Ipswich, beat Fulham, beat Everton, Liverpool, lost to Newcastle, but then won our final two games, beating United and Forest. Obviously, in the Conference League, after getting through Copenhagen, we win comfortably the first leg away at Warsaw, but then have a pretty abject home display. The first time, probably the only time I've ever seen Stamford Bridge boo after seeing their team qualify for European semi-final, but it was a pretty atrocious performance. And this came off the back of the Ipswich draw, which was very damaging. And then obviously comfortably beat Djurgården in the semi-final, and then we'll get to the final. Yeah, it's very easy in hindsight to look back and say, this is the great period of the season and kind of simplify it, right? But there were still some negatives. I don't think the season is revived, turns around, I think clicks into gear to where Chelsea show a sign of seriousness and stakes and ability to rise to pressure until the end of that Fulham game. Because of course we beat Spurs, which is a great thing whenever we beat Spurs, and it was, I think the atmosphere inside Stamford Bridge I thought was amazing that night. It kind of was the start of a trilogy of big home games that ended well for us when you include Liverpool and Man United in there as well. But really, I mean, the draw to Brentford was really frustrating. There was a lot of criticism on Maresca in terms of the lineup, heavily rotated. We didn't win that game. Being 2-0 down at home to Ipswich was atrocious. And some of the post-match comments from Maresca really didn't help out after that game. You lose to Warsaw and you're 1-0 down to Fulham with barely showing anything. And there's about 10 minutes to go. And effectively, it feels like if Chelsea don't turn this around, the season's effectively going to be over. I mean,
Yeah.
I know we have the loss to Newcastle, right? But you really do think if Tyreek George doesn't equalise there, I'm not sure Chelsea. I don't think Chelsea get Champions League football and end the season the way they do.
No, I agree. I agree. Uh, Whether it shows Chelsea's grit, I think is, again, for me. As you know, no, I'm a very glass half empty guy, and I know there's people who might be listening to this rolling their eyes, going, "Oh my god, you're being really harsh." The only reason I'm like this is because um, I like to give credit where it's due, which I have done. I feel on occasion here, and I also like to be a bit real and credit where it's due. Tyreek George and Pedro Neto, I think, turned Chelsea's season around. I still feel, for me, the only time I was actually confident that Chelsea were in a stronger position and give the credit is when Chelsea beat Forest. I think the win against Liverpool was massive. And we can say, and I said it then, Liverpool were on the beach, but you had to beat what's in front of you, and Chelsea did that. The Newcastle loss, I thought, and people have been quite tweeting me this week saying, "Oh, well, you were wrong." So, well, yeah, I was wrong, but if I'm wrong and it means Chelsea get Champions League football, I'm not exactly going to sit here and say, "Oh my
This
god,
is, can I just
why the
say,
hell?"
just get on my soapbox for a bit. This is one of the weirdest things now about the online Chelsea space. And it's probably been like this for a while, right? That I think people tell on themselves quite quickly when the first thing they do after Chelsea have won a big game, is not to celebrate, is not to soak it up, is not
Yeah,
to enjoy it. It's to target other Chelsea fans who have given their honest views and tell them they're all wrong. Like,
yeah,
that's the energy from some people literally since the season ended. And I'm a bit like, to
it's a
me,
bit
like,
sad.
that it is a bit sad because it's like that's what you want to do. Like
Yeah.
that's your energy, and this is the thing. This is why I think people telling themselves, because all I heard for months when people were criticizing during that January, February, March period was, we need unity, we need positivity, we need people to get behind the club. And then when people do get behind the club, as was the case in the first period of the season, their previous positivity or their positivity supporting the club gets used against them. So
Hmm.
classically, it was the Southampton away end chanting, "We've got our Chelsea back," when people were very happy to see those early season performances, which we all, were delighted with. And that gets used against them when they're then critical when performances derail,
Yeah.
as now is the case when people were very happy with what happened against Forest and what happened in
Yeah.
Rocklaw. Like,
Yeah.
so to me, it's just disingenuous. Like, no, to me, you're exposing yourself that you did not actually, unity and positivity was not what you were craving at all. Because surely, if the end of the season would have been the thing that you dreamed of a few weeks ago, and you're just happy about that. And I just find it very weird. Like, um, I've had responses from some of the comments on my shows that people want to sort of do this whole, well, um you need to apologize, you need to, it's terrible the way you were turning your back on the club. And it's like, it's not turning my back on the club to be critical of the club. I think, if here's what I'll say, if you can say with a straight face and an honest face that you at no point doubted what was happening this season, you at no point doubted the coach, you at no doubt doubted the squad and the players and the performances in front of your eyes, you're probably in a very, very small minority.
I'd say they don't exist, Dan. I'd say people are saying that for the sake of it, and if
Yeah,
they do,
yeah, of course,
when,
yeah.
when you say a small minority, I'd try to strike up a conversation with somebody about this after, I think it was after the Fulham game, and they were obviously very critical of us on final score, and I said, look, like, please, if this is how you genuinely feel, I'd really like to hear and understand why you feel that way. And then instead of actually engaging in a conversation, it was just, you're this, you're that, it's this, it's that, you're not genuine, you're not this, you're that. It's like, if you have watched any of mine and Dan's content over the 10 years, I say 10 years because we have been in this game a long time. Over the 10 years Dan and I have been doing this, and the entire period, if you've met us at any point in that, I'd argue we are the same on camera as we are off it. And um, the whole time when people are saying you're being disingenuous, when there's a lot, a lot of footage to back up the fact that that is definitely not the case as well. And then I even had a conversation today. A couple of days, someone was saying that I believe in the project massively, and I really back the sporting directors. I'm like, have you listened or watched any of the stuff that me and Dan have said over the past
Yeah,
18 months? So,
but
no,
that
I don't
it's
need to. Look at it.
it's
It's like, look,
all,
Tracy,
yeah,
yeah. So the Mike Man, look what you were saying yesterday. I'm like, yes, if Chelsea are serious and they get this deal over the line for Mike Mannion, it probably, yes, does show that there is a difference in mentality, which is huge. Like, my dad and I were having a conversation a couple of days ago where, we'll obviously talk. Actually, we'll save it. We'll save it for later on because it's important. But obviously,
mm,
we're talking about Rawclaw and how it could be a watershed, but we'll talk about that later. But yeah, people getting on and saying, you were wrong." I'm like, okay, yeah, I was. And then when you don't react, it's like a whole argument.
yeah,
It's like, mate, like, I am in that Liverpool game, briefly after that Fulham game, after that Forest game, I'm enjoying the moment. I'm doing my job and I'm going, right, Chelsea have got this. That feels great. Fantastic.
mm,
But I'm still going to be critical and I'm still going to raise the points and I'm still going to say what I believe in. And if it turns out to be wrong and Chelsea do really well, fantastic. If I turn out to be right again, guess what? I'm going to say I was right again. It's very much a case of, look, like, I just because, Dan, I feel like it's part of the job, unfortunately, where you put yourself in the firing line if you put yourself out there,
yeah,
and that's the nature of the beast. Um, Unfortunately, it's the minority of people that decide to try and use that actually just ruin the experience. but you just learn to deal with it. And it's something where I think, look, like when people call for unity, I think it's important. You can be united and you can be positive, but you can also be critical about what's going on. And I
It
think
would
Dan
be
and I will
very
remain that way.
boring if me and you, if you're someone that's, it is just reality, right? Like it's easy if you don't have a podcast, if you don't, if you don't have a platform where you're giving your opinions on a regular basis. It's easy to sit back and say after the event, um, I never had any doubts. Like I never had a go at the players. I never criticized anything because there's probably no public record of you doing it other than maybe with your mates, right? Or if you go to games, if you don't go to games, right? That's it, right?
Mm.
Um, it'd be a pretty boring podcast. Is for months on end when Chelsea were not playing well, if we both sat here and went, well, there's nothing wrong. Like, so we don't want to doubt the project, don't want to doubt the players. It would be dishonest. That's the
Yeah,
truth. And I think a lot of this is projection from a lot of people. I think it is projection that it's always like you're accusing things that you're guilty of. Like people can't fathom that someone out there as a Chelsea fan just has a difference of opinion to them and holds it honestly and passionately. And um when they're saying things that are critical of the club, it's not coming from a place of personal gain, an ulterior motive that wants to see the club fail, um, and kind of this straw man argument that was there for most of the season when anyone was critical, dared to be critical of anything. You're not really a Chelsea fan, all of that nonsense, when actually, like, a lot of football fans, the majority of football fans, I think part of being a football fan is being critical of your own club. Like that's
mm.
kind of, it's a humor, especially in terms of British football fans, it's kind of a humorous part of it is, you talk about how crap things are, you bemoan players you think aren't that good. Um,
Yeah,
Speak to fans of Carlisle, speak to fans of Bradford, speak to fans of Wimbledon, and you will hear. I always find it fascinating when you catch glimpses of conversations between fans of clubs that are not competing for Champions League football, that are not spending hundreds of billions. But actually, if you change some of the names, if you change the names of the players they're speaking about, if you change the names of the coaches they're speaking about, it sounds very similar.
yeah,
Because I'm not
yeah.
trying to say that all football clubs are the same and all football club cultures are the same. That's not the point I'm trying to make. But
No,
in terms of football discourse, fans being critical about their own clubs and fans having fears and doubts about their own clubs are as common as breathing air. They are as common as anything like that. That's part of being. But then that also means when things are successful and when things go well, you lap it up. Like
yeah,
I guess we should jump forward now to those final games, right? Like Forest. It was tense, it was nerve-wracking, but the joy that was had when Levi puts that ball in, the joy that was had when we finally get Champions League football, that makes it all worth it in the end. And I thought the
yeah,
performance of those players in those final two games, but especially the Forest game, the pressure that was on that team. It's easy, again, we talk about hindsight as kind of a key word here. It's easy in hindsight to look back and go, well, Villa lost and Everton beat Newcastle. So in the end, Chelsea getting 3 points wasn't as big of a deal as it was because we assumed Villa would win and Everton would lose at Newcastle. Newcastle would get the job done. But the performance of those players was still huge to go away to
mm,
Forest and to win in a pressurised environment. When only a fortnight before that, they'd gone to St James's Park and not put in that performance that we wanted to see.
yeah. Well, that's is it. I mean, you think back to St James Park. Soon as Nico Jackson elbows someone in the head for no reason, that's when I think a lot of people thought the season was over. And I look, I was in that group of people, and I base it off of what I'd seen so far that season. I base it off of that January to March period where we had no striker, where we had no one to lean on. And I thought, right, where's the adaptation going to come? We're not going to see it. We've not seen him adapt. Yet lo and behold, Enzo Maresca has adapted, and I think again, credit where it's due. He got the job done in the style of football. You know, it was very much a case of the way he wanted to play football was it was boring, but with Chelsea won 1-0. Chelsea won little goal here, little goal there, and showed that I think if there is a number nine added with pedigree, which we still might see, and obviously Liam Delap I think is still an excellent addition to the team. Um, Chelsea might be different next season, and it shows that there was something there. So, you know, those performances, and obviously that Forest performance, when we win that game, I, you know what? All I could think after the game when he basically turned around and said "fuck you," in fact, he did say "fuck you." You know, I thought, you know what? Everything that he'd been through in that period between January and March, that beginning of the season, where in reflection, I was literally just going through my old WhatsApp group earlier, just sort of see how people were reacting throughout the season, just getting little brief looks at it. We're talking about how much he sounded like a Chelsea manager in his press conferences. I think, obviously, this was in the beginning period, and then obviously, then he had this final game against Forest. The way he brought it all together, went, we were told this team was too young. We were told this. We were told that. Fuck you. So, okay. Do you know what? Fair play.
Mm.
That's all you could say. That, but you're like, yeah. Do you know what? Fair enough.
Mm.
I think that the way that he brought it all together was spectacular, and you know that I feel was a team maturing, like you
Mm.
were saying. Um, and now that that team's matured, I think that it's got a benchmark now. The right additions to this team, I think, could definitely see it move in a stronger direction. Um, and we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I mean, look, that Forest performance, and Rocklaw, I was saying, I was talking to my dad as well. I don't know about you, mate, but he was saying, and this is a guy who's been even more critical of this than you or I have. Um, the way that my dad sort of looked at Chelsea, the past couple of years, he's basically gone, look, like he's supported the club since the '60s, so he's seen it all, and in the grand scheme of things, and how everything's panned out, this is the worst period he's seen Chelsea perform, given the tools that they had available to them, right?
Mm.
And he's gone, the past 2-3 years have been the worst he's ever seen Chelsea, ever. Um, and, he looked at Rocklaw, and he looked at Chelsea's move for Mike Maignan, which still might happen. And he looked at other things and went, overall, Forest and Rocklaw has the potential to be a massive watershed moment for this ownership and for Chelsea, because the way that Maresca held himself, the way the team performed, the way they came back against Betis, by the way, as well. When they went 1-0 down, I think everybody was thinking about January to March and going,
Mm.
shit, right, what's going to happen here? Shit. And then they came and absolutely dismantled them in the second half. Um, and Forest as well, 1-0 up against a team which throughout the season, before that awkward run they had where they completely fell off the map completely, Forest was a difficult place to go. Chelsea went in,
Yeah.
got the job done, left with 3 points. Yeah, you said it might not be important, but again, mentality, watershed moment, getting Champions League football, winning the Conference League and Rocklaw when people thought, okay, maybe they're taking the foot off the gas because they don't need it. No, we're getting a trophy. That is massive, massive. And I think a big thing about Rocklaw, by the way, as well. I mean, you were there, so it's kind of a case. Obviously, you weren't listening to Final Score. You're a bit busy on the piss, mate, and
Well,
that's
there was there
absolutely
was there was no as well. You might have heard this. There was literally no service inside the stadium,
yeah.
so we were completely disconnected, obviously. And then yeah, it was. But yeah, sorry, finish for.
No, but he was busy on the piss, guys, and that's what the Chelsea Echo is all about. Dan was having a good time, and that's what we do here. But the way Chelsea fans were thinking, and the way it kind of moved very quickly, the show was about an hour and a half. After about 20 minutes, no one gave a shit about the Conference League. It was like, right, what's next? And it's testament to how Chelsea fans think, but I think it also was testament to how Chelsea moved in the transfer market, or potentially moving in the transfer market. Because when we were linked with the names in the past, you could tell it was flimsy and didn't maintain much strength because it disappeared after 24, 48 hours. This has been consistent for about a week now. So Chelsea have
Yeah.
been on the case of somebody here. So it's okay. These are real names that Chelsea are looking at. And the way that I think it was cemented like that 20 minutes after the Conference League final when everyone went, right, we've won it all. That's great. Fantastic. It's a benchmark. Right, what's next? It's kind of a case of that's reinforced into the psyche of a Chelsea fan. It's reinforced into the psyche of the club. So now, hopefully, and I say
Mm.
this, I'd touch, that's metal, but I can't find any wood other than my head nearby. Touch wood, right? This is when Chelsea take things up a notch. And qualifying for the Champions League, having that watershed moment is not going to be in vain. Because, again, I've been critical and I can be hypercritical. That is the way I am, unfortunately. But credit where it is due. Chelsea got the job done. They got it done in style. So
Mm.
now, given Roclaw and how they played, to me, that was very similar to the games against Wolves, to the game against Brighton. You know, we saw a side which was high flying, excelling in their field. And yeah, you can say it was a Conference League. Yeah, you can say it was Betis. Betis had an all right season, but they weren't great. It doesn't matter. You beat what's in front of
Mm.
you. And Chelsea did it convincingly. So now it's a case going, well, now they need to be allowed to do it again and again and again and again. And they need to be back to the market. Maresca does, as does the team, to get even better. And those watershed moments in Poland and in Nottingham were perfect.
No, I completely agree. I think that the symbolic nature, especially of Broclaw. I mean, to me personally, like I'd never been to a European away, so obviously this one holds like special significance for me. Um, Genuinely, like yeah, it's I don't really care what anyone says. Like top five football experience for me being inside that stadium. The 20 minutes once Enzo's equalizer goes in, um, that away end is just it was just insanity, really. Especially like the glory of everything going so well. I mean, it couldn't have gone much better, really. Goal after goal after goal. There's no stressful last added time period because Chelsea are just strolling to lift a trophy. And I think the thing that resonates with me most is a big question I think we had, and we constantly had this conversation of like, do the things that matter to us fans resonate as much? Like in terms of just like qualifying for the Champions League, how much that matters, winning a trophy, how much that matters, because we haven't done it for a few years. Does that matter internally? Does that matter to Enzo Maresca? Does that matter to the players? Does that matter to the people above? And I think what's been undeniably clear, pretty much since that Fulham game, I think the reaction of the players late on when Neto scored that winner, um, all the way up to Roclaw and kind of the second half performance and the celebrations post game, all of that stuff is genuine. It's real. It's tangible, and it kind of did feel like the closing of a chapter that starts maybe when we win the Club World Cup in 2022, when the sanctions hit and the change
Mm,
of ownership. And hopefully now this is the turning of a page. I really do hope we bigged it up pre-game, didn't we? Forest, as kind of this generation's 2003 Liverpool game. And I really do hope that those two games are defining for this group, because I think for
yeah.
Maresca maturing as a still a young head coach, I think adapting to his situation and the control element of his coaching actually coming to the fore in a good way for Chelsea, of like locking games down and understanding, like sort of approaching those final two games as what they were, finals, and being able to win both in different ways. But the players themselves growing. I mean, I look at sort of the growth of Levi Colwell just individually. He had some difficult periods this season, as did Chelsea. But I thought the way he ended the season was wonderful, and seeming to grow in stature in kind of
Mm,
that role. Reece James, the way he was managed and being able to play more football than he has in many years is huge for Chelsea, and taking a leading role, lifting a trophy as Chelsea captain for the first time. Enzo Fernandez, again, a player I was very critical of earlier in the season, but I think he's started to show signs that he is a big player for us, scoring big goals. And obviously, like, there's no getting around, like, just genius of Cole Palmer, like, just an insane talent. I mean, that second half rivaled Edin's finale in Baku, really, didn't it? In terms of like a player just taking the ball and just going and just changing the complexion of a game.
Yeah,
And that's not taking down the team spirit of everyone else. That's not taking down the insane performances of Moises Caicedo throughout the course of the season. My love for Trevor Chalobah, even the growth of Robert Sanchez, who had a strong end to the year, and Cucurella has been amazing. There's been loads of players individually you can look at, but when you got a talent like Cole Palmer, he kind of ties it all together and could take you to another level. So I really do hope those two games I really don't want to be here in like 5-6 months and we have a change of head coach and the season has started disastrously and the transfers haven't worked out and it feels like we're back to square one. This really does have to be the turning of a page now, where Chelsea are not just consistently getting Champions League football, but now are looking above that. They're looking to for the first time, this club
challenge.
since 2017, to seriously challenge for a Premier League title. That has to be the aim. And I don't care if, whatever I said 2 years ago or whatever looks stupid. I could not give a shit. Like, genuinely, like, because my enjoyment when I see Chelsea lift a trophy, you want to experience moments like that over and over again.
Yeah,
Because it is, it's the peak of being a football supporter, right? So I really do hope that those games are as significant as they feel currently. It's we're still quite close to them. So, but in some ways, you kind of hope it's just a start. Like, we look back in 5 years' time as kind of, those weren't like the 03 game was significant, but like, think about what happened after that. Like, 05 Bolton, winning the league again a year later, with the Champions League wins, the FA Cup wins, they kind of they went to another level of enjoyment that fans didn't
yeah,
expect. I hope we look back at Rocklaw, not in kind of a dismissive way, but in a way of like, well, we went to another level. But that was kind of that was the start of an era of success,
yeah,
not kind of just a brief moment and then went back to being mediocre. And I agree with you. I think the start to this summer so far looks wildly different to a year ago.
yeah,
And the big thing I can say is, everything I've seen in terms of the players we're targeting, there's football logic behind it. There is logic behind trying to improve the squad in a football way, rather than these wild targets that are either never going to play for us, don't improve the first team. We're looking to sell our best players for stupid reasons, or players that just again are not gonna elevate what we have, not don't seem to be in any football way improving the options for the current head coach. I think whatever you think of Mike Magnon, whatever you think of Leon Delap, whatever you think of Hugo Ekitike or other players we've been linked to, I think no one can really argue against that. They look like decisions or targets that are going in there with the intention of improving what we have,
yeah,
which it sounds it's I'm not breaking down it. This is not groundbreaking football analysis, but it's football transfer window should be about improving your squad. But like, given where we were 12 months ago, I mean, it feels like a different planet. So, and as we said about Maresca, it would be the same with the sporting directors. If they can get Mike Magnon over the line, if they can oversee a transfer window that improves our squad in key ways, I'll be happy to give them praise, because that's the way it works. Like, it's not I'm team reality. I'm team living in the real world. Like, I'm not I really don't, again, projection, right? Like, because people are so wrapped up in their own agendas, like they can't fathom that someone would admit they're wrong, because they could never admit they're wrong. Like, I think both of us here, we have our principles, we have things that we stick by. But if people do things well, we're going to praise it. If people don't, I always think it's a pretty simple equation for my
yeah,
analysis. If Chelsea play well, I'm happy, I praise them. If Chelsea don't play well, I'm not going to sit here and claim that they played well, because it just insults everyone's intelligence. And I think that that's what has made the end of the season so great, right? That I don't feel any shame. I don't feel any like, what, trust me, in that away end in Row Claw, I wasn't like, oh, well, I'm celebrating Enzo scoring and Jackson scoring, but that opinion I had 12 months ago now looks stupid. No, I don't give a shit. Like, I'm I'm
no.
I'm I'm a Chelsea fan at the end of the day.
Exactly. To put it bluntly, guys, if you can adapt and change your opinion and admit when you're wrong, it's a sign of growing up, and that's what Dan and
Yeah.
I have done over an extensive period of time. Dan's getting married. That's it. He's more grown up than I am, and he always will be. He's got a mortgage. He's getting married. You know, he's probably going to be getting another cat or a dog soon. He's not told me yet, and he'll just tell me when the cat turns up on camera. When what else? Probably, you know, it's probably you got an X card.
Oh no, I don't yet, but I did. I do have a Tesco Club card.
This is what I mean, guys. I've still not got one of those, and I need to get one. So yeah, that's that. Really, to be honest, it's been a hell of a roller coaster. If we were to grade the season, should we do it as a number grade or should we do it as a letter grade, Dan? If you were to grade, let's do a number grade. If you were to grade it out of 10, what are you going with?
Based on my pre-season expectations, I think it's got to be a 9.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because the expectation of the season was getting back in the Champions League. The expectation of the season was winning the trophy that was there in front of us, which was the Conference League. And I also think the way in which we did it, in the manner in which we did it, the emotion that came with that, and the adversity the players overcame, and the pressure the coach and players overcame, I think is significant, right? Because
Yeah.
the pressure was always going to be there, but you still have to overcome it. And as we just said, like you can't. It's about being consistent, right? I don't think we can say how important these things are, and then in the aftermath go, well, they should have done it anyway. I just, like from a fan and like from my own point of view, I hate the lowering of stakes of stuff like that. Like I just,
Yeah.
it's just it makes all of it seem a bit pointless. So that's why I rank it very highly. Um, Although it was, yeah, objectively based on where I predicted we'd finish, we actually finished higher. I predicted us fifth, which of course would have got us Champions League football.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm gonna go. I think 9 is where I'd rank the
Yeah.
season, and it's all in context, right? That's not a 9 on like the scale of Chelsea seasons overall. Like it's not, but you have to deal with the reality you're currently in. So I think that's why it's as high as it is for me.
Yeah. I I want to say a 9, but the only reason I'm not going to is because I feel because we're talking about the watershed moments, right? I want it. I'm basically I'll give it a 9 with you now, but it could go lower if Chelsea do not build on that success they've had at the end of the season. So for me, it's very much a case of make the most out of the moment. Obviously, right now, 9 out of 10, job done. You know, like me and you were saying from the beginning of the season, they get the job done. It's a good season. That stands as it is, but it can go lower if Chelsea don't utilize that
Yeah.
success. It could go as low as a 7 for me if Chelsea don't go right. Where we weak this season, here, and here. Right, let's build on it. The whole thing, every single time you and I have had a conversation, we spoke about is we want to see progress. Chelsea have progressed; they've gone up in the season points wise. Not so much, and I think it's fair to say that any other season it might not have been as clear cut, but in the end, as it was.
I feel
That
like, but to be fair, I mean, I think 71. How many points did we? 69. Was it 69 in the end?
69. I'm never going to
Yeah.
forget that points total. Hey!
I'm pretty sure it was
Yeah,
60. It was 69, wasn't it, in the end?
it
Which
was there thereabouts. It was
it was
there
there.
thereabouts.
But I think the thing that Chelsea got slightly fortunate was that second part we spoke about. They were so bad for that long, and they were still heading into the final run of the season, basically fourth or
Yeah,
fifth. So I guess you could argue that, well, in truth, if we're going to be objective about it, like the league below Liverpool was poor. There was
yeah,
literally no title race this year. I don't want to hear anything from Arsenal fans. There was no title race this year at all. Um, from basically January, we knew Liverpool were going to win a Premier League title. Like it was so. And the fact that Chelsea finished actually so close to second place, where if we'd beat, I think literally, mathematically, if we'd beaten Ipswich twice, we would have finished second, which
mhm,
is insane, right? In terms of like, um, where you think Chelsea were in time, kind of distance to second. So it's hard to judge that going into next season, where you think, well, surely everyone below first can't be as bad again. Um, but I'm also always a believer that you play within the season you're in. And like when people tried to dismiss Lampard getting fourth because it was 66 points and that was one of the lowest totals we've had for Champions League in some time, I sort of think that's a bit petty, right? Because again,
Yeah.
the season, if Chelsea win the Premier League next season and we win it on like 79 points, I really don't care what anyone says. We're Premier League champions. I don't
Yeah.
like it's
Yeah.
not,
Too
and it's a bit
right.
like Liverpool fans like seemingly getting sensitive because of points tallies and like where you should be happy you're Premier League champions. Like that's what it is. So in a sense, yeah, in terms of like points totals, I think it's more like rather than writing off the fact that yeah we did achieve what we wanted to, it's more like, well, how can we improve that by 10 points next year? How can we
Yeah.
get closer to 80 points, which we haven't as a club, as I say, since we won the Premier League title? A non-title winning season, we haven't hit, I think, 80 or more points since 13-14. So that's how long ago it was Chelsea were in a title race and didn't actually win it and still had a pretty high points tally. That's 13-14 is kind of what I'm looking at for next year, more than
Mm.
like if we don't win a Premier League title, it's a failure. No, I'm not. Obviously, that's silly. It's more like, can we actually look like we're in a sustained title period, and can the points tally be to a place at the end where you can go, okay, we're actually not that far away
Yeah.
to winning it, rather than like 15-point gap to the champions is still too big.
Yeah. And obviously, Dan and I will talk more about that as the season does come around, because there is obviously a lot to talk about there with that, like a lot. Um, and Chelsea have already made moves in the market to hopefully address some of those things. But me and Dan will definitely be talking about that as the season does come up in August. But, ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of another season for the Chelsea Echo. Time has flown by. Unfortunately, we don't have the budget of the BBC, nor do we have the footage to create an end of season montage. So you're just going to have to deal with us saying goodbye in our own very special way, which is just saying goodbye, to be honest. But before we do that, Dan, it has been an absolute pleasure doing it with you this season. You're sticking around, aren't you? Not planning on going
Yeah,
anywhere. There we
yeah.
go.
I
Sorted.
haven't got any offers from Saudi yet, so I
Well, there
can't
you
say the
go.
same about the Donk. So I can only speak for myself, not the Donk.
We'll have to sit down with the Donk Report writers and see if we can figure something out there. But lads, ladies, everything in between, this has been the Chelsea Echo in 2024-2025. A bald man arrived in June last year, and in June this year, he's a European champion with Chelsea and a club that has won it all. If you have enjoyed it, please do make sure you give us a 5-star review. It really does help the pod out. We're looking forward to seeing you in the Club World Cup in 2 weeks' time. I've been Louis. That's been Dan. This has I've been this has been the Chelsea Echo, and we'll see you soon. Bye bye.